Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tippie Career Webinar on Career Pivots, 5 Steps to Consider. My name's Barbara Thomas, and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni and Constituent Engagement at the Tippie College of Business, and I will be your moderator today. Now, this webinar is one of many webinars produced by the Tippie College's Alumni Relations Office. On June 8th, Tippie Dean Amy Christoph Brown will present the state of the college in a webinar that's open to all. And later today, I will put a link to that registration page in the chat. Now, the Tippie College's webinars cover a wide range of topics, everything from what's happening in the macro economy to salary negotiations. And the best thing about it is that all of those webinars are saved on the college's YouTube page. So if you would like to see one of our old webinars that might provide you with the information that you need right now, you can access that. So later in this webinar, I will give you that link in the chat as well. Now, our webinars are all free and open to anyone at all. So if you know anyone that might be interested in any of our future topics, please feel free to share the information with them and encourage them to register. Now, before we begin, as always, we do want to go over a few housekeeping issues. We have enabled live transcription, the live transcription service that's offered by Zoom for our hearing impaired guests. Now, if you don't want to see this, you can turn it off. All you have to do is go to the live transcription button on your bottom of your screen and click on the caret beside live transcription, and you should see an option to hide subtitles. You can also enlarge the subtitles if you would so desire. A reminder is that these are auto-generated transcriptions and they're only done in English. Now, through our event, you can submit questions to us through the Q&A button, which you will also find on the bottom. We'll do our best to address as many of your questions as we can today. Now, please note that in a webinar, the chat works differently than it does in a regular Zoom meeting. You basically have 2 options. You can send a chat to everyone or to all panelists. So if you think you have great information to share with other people watching this webinar, please make sure that you have chosen to everyone when you add that comment. Now, lastly, I want to remind you that you do have some options to select on how you view this webinar. As you'll see, there will be PowerPoints, but you can actually adjust it through the little view button as to whether you want to see the gallery or the speaker and how wide you want to make the PowerPoint or whether you'd like to see larger things. You'll basically see a little line between the PowerPoint and between the people, and you can kind of adjust that back and forth. Now, for this webinar, we suggest that you use speaker view. And when we get to our questions and answers with all of our panelists, we suggest the gallery view. And as always, remember that all of Tippie's webinars are recorded and shared on the college's YouTube page. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, Kara Avis. Now, Kara is an assistant director and career coach in the Tippie College's Career Services Office. She has more than 16 years experience in higher education within career services, admissions, and student services and advising. Kara has worked with a wide array of students throughout her career in higher education, and finds great satisfaction in helping students achieve success in their chosen paths. A native of Southern Illinois, Kara has a BA in Communications and Public Relations from Culver-Stockton College and an MA in Human Resource Development from Webster University. She and her husband, Brad, and their cat, Layla, enjoy spending time with friends and family, and in the summer months, you can always find them on a lake somewhere. So please join me in welcoming Kara Avis.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you being a part of this today. Looking forward to talking to you a little bit about pivoting and exploring the pivoting roles. We thank you for all the questions that came in ahead of time. And as Barb mentioned, I'll try to address some of them throughout my presentation and make sure that we can kind of touch on little ones. So when considering a job pivot, it is a big conversation in the job market today. Pivoting, just changing thought and changing direction, changing your job path, career path even, just changing it to be something different. There's so many different reasons why people are looking to pivot today. It can be something within your own company. It can be something within your career path, but at a different company. This last couple of years, the climate of the economy has really changed the way that we look at different things as far as, possibly our companies reorganizing, possibly it being a need for some new motivation, some new direction. What is it that's wanting and moving you to make these considerations? Currently, over 50% of Americans employees are considering a career pivot. And I think a lot of times it gets stuck on the age of the pivoter. Oh, well, it's somebody younger, it's somebody older, which is not true. Over life, things change. It might make us want to do something later in life. So mid-career pivots, we're seeing some of those now. Just because they're looking for that new motivation, as we spoke about. We had heard that millennials were going to be this group of individuals who were going to change the way that we looked at employment. Gone were the days where you would go and work at a business for 30 some odd years in the same job. This group of people were meant to have 17 careers in their lifetime. And we're seeing that now with the state of the world, it's kind of changing and the needs are changing. And a lot of individuals are falling within this actual bucket of wanting to change and making that change. So what are some steps that we can consider when we're looking at a job pivot and looking for change? The first one, and probably in my opinion, the most important, is the reflection. Reflecting on what is it that's making me feel that I need to make this pivot? Is it a situation in life? Is it something that I'm really wanting to change? One of my mentors had a great quote for me one time. She said, you always want to make sure when you're looking at a job pivot that you're running to something. You're not running from something. Because a lot of times if we're running from something, you might run into the same situation you're in currently. So you want to make sure that you're going to something that's going to feed that you want. So through this reflection, that can be done. Identifying what your professional skill set is. What is it that I'm bringing to my current position? What is it that I can take to another position? What makes me sellable? Reinventing your brand. Thinking about what is it that people see in me? What is my actual personal brand? What do I sell to, or what is my elevator pitch, so to speak? If I'm giving my background to individuals, what do I say? Where am I coming from? Where do I want to go? What do I need to do to build that? Using tools that you might have, from updating resumes to, connecting online and so on and so forth. And lastly, leveraging and growing your network. We, over your professional career, have this network that you're building, but how is it that you can leverage that? How is it that you can maybe grow it to fit better what you're wanting to do to make these next steps? So in the first step, reflecting. So starting with the why. You have to understand why you need to make this change in order to be able to go through those steps. This can be the hardest part of the entire process because you have to ask some hard questions of yourself. You have to really reflect in what is it that I'm motivated by? What is it that I'm moving towards? What is it that I want to achieve? So through thinking it through, we can kind of make those steps. But the hard part is typically if there's obstacles in the way, sometimes you can get discouraged in this thinking. A lot of times we might even be the ones in our own way and not being able to make that next step. They're telling yourself, well, it's been years since I made a job change or a job search, or the market has changed so much, or I have no idea where to get started. So a lot of times we can kind of tell ourselves that this isn't going to work. And if you think about back to your classes that you took as a part of the Tippie family, you were given kind of some tools that you could use to kind of navigate through those paths. So maybe it's going back to that and thinking, I've got these different areas or these tools, or what was it that motivated me at that time to get my MBA or to, take the job that I took currently. So using those tools, and also using the kind of the 3 whys. So why is it that I want to pivot? Like we said, are we running away from something? Are we running towards something? How do you know when it's time to leave? Am I leaving because of a specific situation? Am I leaving because I just need something new? Am I leaving because it's just not satisfying me anymore? What can I do? I need a new challenge, or I need a new motivation, and the excitement that can come behind that. What is it that excites me personally? How am I best motivated? Is it something to where I wait until I kind of can find the path I want to at my organization, or is there something else that kind of will drive me and make me excited? And when is it that I need to make the change? Am I ready for the change now? Do I have the option of looking for another position? Do I, must I have a new job ASAP? Like, what is it that's kind of pushing forward? We had a question about taking time off between pivots or taking a gap year. And that might be what works best for you. But the one thing I would say is make sure that if you do take that time off, you want to make sure that you can explain that time off, right? Make sure that there's a reason and a thought put behind it versus just saying, I'm worn out, I just don't know what to do next. And if you can explain it, then absolutely. But just know that when you get into the next job cycle, you want to be able to explain those things. So there are 2 different types of paths that you can take during this reflection process of thinking about where you want to go. You have an organizational pivot path, which would be within your current company, or an internal path move, or you have a personal career pivot path. That would be something that you're kind of going outside of where you currently are. We had a question about steps that would be recommended for an internal pivot path. So looking for a position within your own company, and how might you navigate that? If you're seeking a position within your own company, you might think about trying to help out with special projects, or maybe taking an online course that would connect with what you're doing, earning a certificate. And we have some great ones within the MBA program, mentoring some colleagues, or mentoring a colleague, or even shadowing a colleague for the day, kind of getting an idea of what options would be available to me within my own company. Or maybe you already have an idea of what that looks like, but that would just be some steps that I would recommend that you could possibly take. On the personal side, creating kind of a new path on the external side of things, leaving your current company, changing positions, changing maybe the function you would be doing. And you could use things like the skills that you have gained or that you have, your interests, again, that passion we talked about, what's pushing you, your hobbies, your values. These are things that can kind of help you navigate what that path might look like, because it can be a little daunting to think about, I want to leave my organization, but I'm not sure what I want to do. Doing some of that reflection and research on that could help. So questions that we get a lot are kind of some examples of career pivots that individuals, could take or have taken. And we're very fortunate, and I will introduce them a little further in the presentation. We have some Tippie alum who are going to talk about their career pivot paths. And just to give you an example, these 3 career pivot paths kind of reflect what those 3 individuals did. So they're going to talk a little bit more about it, but I kind of wanted to share with you just an overview of what that looked like, right? So our second step, identifying your professional skill set. We hear the term transferable skills quite a bit, and this is kind of what would be in that area. Identifying those skills that would make you marketable. What sets you apart? So within your professional skill set, you are, when you're looking for positions that would fit your wants, your needs, your ability, you want to remember, think about those skills that you would have that you could bring to the table. Don't sell yourself short either. I think we had a couple of questions that talked about moving from one specific career to another specific career that were different. And those kinds of traits can go across. If for instance, if we have somebody that, I've only worked in industry and I want to move into sales, for instance, right? You have a lot of those different skills that you've gained. You have to think about the project management, or maybe it's the managerial skills. You have conflict management. There's a lot of soft skills as well as those technical skills, those systems that you used, different things that might have come into play, budgetary experience. Those kinds of things will help you to stand out. And you want to, like I said, I think a lot of times it's daunting to think about, and we tend to maybe sell ourselves a little short when we're thinking about what those skills might look like. And in these skills too, this is just a kind of a list of a couple of few that we would kind of share with students. And after the presentation, I did want to let you know there are a couple of follow-up worksheets that I'm going to send out to all of those that attended today, just to kind of help you, that has this information on it for anybody that would be interested. But traits and qualifications can be job specific or technical, like I said, understanding how those specific platforms work, but they definitely can vary from person to person and from job to job. So, if I think we had a question about if someone knows a change is happening within their company, how can they go about gaining skills to make themselves more marketable? Well, we have one of the things that I'm going to send is a gap analysis sheet. And the gap analysis sheet will actually help an individual who is wanting to make a pivot path to kind of identify those things, the key skills that are needed, the training that's needed from that, and maybe other things that are needed. And so it would show you the steps to get from where you are to where you want to be. We also had a question about tests, and would there be any that could, I recognize strengths and weaknesses, and absolutely there are. There's online assessments that you can take. Just go out and kind of just do strength assessments, and it definitely, you could find several. LinkedIn is a great place to start. They have a lot of different opportunities too. And you can even maybe get to the point where you're adding skills through some of the assessments that you're doing. So again, I will share some of these, or I'll share these two last slides with you with worksheets that'll kind of help you keep that information. Step 3 would be reinventing your brand. We all have a personal brand. It is something that we have built as professionals. But this reinventing, this idea of reinventing, is thinking about what it is that you're needing to make that next step. If you are pivoting out of your current position, maybe you're going on a different journey in your path. Maybe you're taking that personal path and you're trying to find those things that would maybe connect back with what you're driven by, what your passion is, so on and so forth. And this is a good way to do so. So thinking about what you stand for, what you have accomplished, and what you're capable of achieving. So when hiring managers are going through applications, the goal is often to research job applicants and kind of looking for what their background is, but also what they're passionate about. And our brand speaks to that. So, staying ahead of the game by making sure that, when we talk about LinkedIn and specific words that are on LinkedIn, and we have a great presentation on LinkedIn within the alumni slides that Barb was talking about that I would recommend looking and watching for LinkedIn information. You want them to find information that's flattering. You want them to find information that shows you in the best light. Consistency is key. In a consistent brand, let your potential employers know that you're goal-oriented, that you have a master plan for your career, or at least that you are focused on a strategy that will help you achieve your goals. So it's you can almost look at as a consistent brand as almost like a marketing tool that serves as your own personal billboard, one that would grow and change over time, but you use your personal brand to tell a story, to establish your core goals. What is it that makes you unique? And this can kind of help you learn to talk to you, like that elevator speech I mentioned earlier, making it be something that, you're talking about yourself in maybe a different way because of the different things you've learned. So a little reflection on that, how do I reinvent my brand? How do I make some of these changes? You'll hear me use the word consistency a lot through this presentation because consistency is key. On social media, being authentic on social media, reflecting who you are both personally and professionally. We have personal social media, we have professional social media. Sometimes the personal is locked down, other times it's not, and individuals can get to it. So you want to make sure that's reflective across the board. In-person networking. So attending professional events and connecting with individuals from the past and the present that could maybe serve as mentors. We had questions about, how do I find a mentor? What do I do if I, how can I search that out? This is a great way to do so. Connecting with individuals that you've had a connection with in the past that could maybe serve as that mentor. Applying for different positions. So describing your professional and personal side in a descriptive, like 5 words, right? And you can use your strengths if if that's something you wanted to do. I know maybe all of us have on LinkedIn, they will build a personal statement for you based on the resume that you've put on LinkedIn. I think mine's kind of like an experienced leader of change with a background in higher education, on and on and on and on. So they will you can have individuals find that. So thinking about what those key words are that you would want to make sure you are leading with. What are your unique qualities? What sets you apart? Do you have specific certifications? The one I always think is, can you speak more than one language? Are you passionate about a specific group or or a cause? Those kind of things can help you to build and refocus the brand. And I think the important thing when talking about a brand is recognizing your limits on this. And what I mean by that is not getting focused on or showing a not focused brand. For instance, you might have amazing managerial skills and you've done all these kinds of things, but you also love a specific sports team, right? And so you lead all of your social media with the specific sports teams, and you're not talking about yourself from a professional standpoint. Yes, you're passionate about that, but you're not necessarily reflecting that. So you want to make sure that you're focusing, and again, back to showing what your path is and what your focus is. Overpraising yourself, meaning too much, can keep people from being able to get to know you, and it can come off as unauthentic. And I think, we live in a world where social media, there is sometimes that inauthentic individuals. And so you want to make sure that, that's not coming across. You want to be present online and in person, and also be careful of oversharing. Too much can be too much. So you want to be present, but you kind of want to know that limit too as well. Okay, so now we've come to the part of our presentation where we're going to share a little bit with our alumni. We are very, very fortunate to have 3 Tippie alumni join us today. Kate Steele, who is the consulting project manager for Microsoft Industry Solutions. Jan Fossey, who is the Senior Director of Online Operations for Tippie School of Business, and Ryan Steele, who is Manager of Supply Chain and Operations for Accenture. And the 3 of them have all had career pivots. And so I thought it was really important to hear from individuals, particularly our Tippie alumni, to be able to show you how they've used skills and so on and so forth, and maybe so that they can share a little bit about their journey. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate first and let her take it, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kara. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm really excited to share my experience in pivoting in a career. I started my career as an industrial engineer. I got an industrial engineering degree from Iowa and started working at General Mills in their manufacturing engineering leadership development program. I quickly realized that I liked a lot about manufacturing, but the day-to-day of manufacturing was not my thing. I loved working with people. I loved solving technical problems, but the day-to-day, being in a plant, turning wrenches, doing that kind of thing, I didn't love. So it was pretty quickly I realized that I needed to think about the next step. I had the opportunity to try a few different things while I was at General Mills. I found a passion for leading teams and got into operations management, still at the plant level. Did a lot of work, running shift operations, and started to have conversations with people about, okay, what's the next step for me? And I appreciate, I was really open with one of my bosses and shared with him, I'm doing a lot of work executing projects, solving technical problems, but I'm really excited about the way we're trying to grow the business and the way we're trying to introduce new products and try new things. And I expressed to him that I was potentially interested in pivoting into marketing. And I appreciate that he was really honest with me. And he said, if you truly want to do that, you're not going to get to it this way. And he was honest and said, product marketing is very competitive, especially for big CPG companies. And he said, if you want to do that, you're basically going to need to go get an MBA and completely shift, what you're doing. So that was pretty frustrating for me at the time, because here I was doing good work in a big company. And I could see people doing the types of jobs I thought I wanted to do, but I knew that education piece was going to be a barrier. So at that point, I came up with a plan to make a big change. I applied for MBA programs, and during that time also found ways to lean into what I thought was interesting, deviating a little bit. I was doing my day-to-day job, but found ways to work more on product startups, still from the execution point, but got to see a little bit behind the curtains of how the business was making decisions and leading some of those changes. I also found myself digging more into some of the technology in our plants, doing some projects to, increase visibility to data that people needed to use to make decisions, that kind of thing. Applied for other jobs and just found that I was still getting a lot of traction in manufacturing, in operations, and that just wasn't what I wanted to do. So came back to Iowa for the full-time MBA program. And that's when I started a rebrand. And Kara, I love that you talked about that. That was really important for me. And I think, I'm fortunate to have Jan and Ryan here, who were both with me on that journey through the MBA program. And if I had to summarize it, it was a 2-year journey in rebranding myself. I came into business school as Kate the engineer, and I did not want to be Kate the engineer anymore. I wanted to be Kate the person who grows businesses, Kate who influences top line instead of bottom line. And so again, tried lots of different things, got to do some consulting engagements through Tippie and realized I had a passion for consulting, and specifically loved the way that companies were using data to grow their businesses. So with that, also picked up a master's in business analytics just because I thought it was interesting and applicable, and came out of my MBA in an IT consulting role for a company called Cognizant, and did a lot of work helping CPG companies to grow their business by using technology. And that was really great. It was a good way for me to build my capabilities in both the consulting space and technology, and was finding more and more that I had a passion for digital product management within that space, and worked to build my brand while I was at Cognizant as being somewhat of, an internal expert on how to do product management well in a consulting environment. Found ways to teach others, found ways to, build some awareness around product management, get some really good hands-on experience. And then that led me to Microsoft, where I am now as a principal consulting product manager. And I get to I look back at 5 years ago and some of the themes of what I knew I liked, and I look at what I'm doing now, and it aligns really well. I get to work with big companies to grow their business by using technology. And it's a really good use of my skills. It was a role I didn't even know existed 5 years ago, when I knew I needed to make a change. But by leaning into the areas I thought were really interesting, and also leveraged my skill set, rebuilt my brand, and just spent tons of time, just working on that branding and learning about what's out there. And I'm really, really happy with where I've landed. It's not the end of the road, but I think I am going to use, what I've learned through that couple year long pivot, to keep pushing toward, toward where I want to be. So that's the story of kind of my career journey. And I think we'll have some questions and stuff. I'm excited to share more, but yeah, I'll hand it off back to Kara, I think.
Actually, I will let Jan take it next.
Thank you, Kate. That was a great story. I especially appreciate how you've made this pivot, not only from operations and manufacturing kind of product management to the tech and software point of product management, because that's very different. And that's a switch sometimes people want to make, and it's very challenging. So hats off to you. Kara, thank you for having me. I hope I'm able to share some information that's helpful for the audience. I'm going to talk very briefly about a couple career pivots. My first career pivot was very early on in my career, and I started out as a human resources professional. It was actually Tippie well, it wasn't Tippie at the time, but a business degree from the University of Iowa. And I went to work in a manufacturing organization that manufactured fireplaces. When I spent my time in human resources, I enjoyed it. I think it was a great way to enter business, especially right out of being an undergrad. But it didn't take me long to look around at the organization and realize that the marketing department, kind of similar to Kate's story, was driving change and driving the strategy, and really had a hand in choosing what direction the company was going to go. And oftentimes in manufacturing, that seems to be like through product lines. And that really intrigued me. And I expressed an interest in wanting to move from HR into marketing. And the advice that I got was, that's great, but you're going to need to have some people management experience, which is very understandable. So I said, okay, sign me up. I'm ready. Let's do it. And I was given second shift manufacturing operations to manage multiple departments and a lot of different staff, and a lot of different things to think about and deal with that were very different from the HR role I was in. I learned a ton, and I did that for about a year. And then I realized that an MBA degree would be very helpful, because some of the individuals that were getting the kinds of roles that I was interested in, which also happened to be product management, product line management, had an MBA. So I went through the MBA program at Iowa. I chose the executive program. That was the right program for me at the time. And while I was working on my MBA, a product manager role came up. And while I wasn't necessarily the first candidate, and people weren't rushing to me to offer me that role, I did apply, and I competed and made the case for why I thought I would be a good fit in this environment to have a chance at that role. And they did. They took a chance on me, and I got that role. And I spent quite a bit of time, a number of years, in different product management roles, and changed industries at one point into office furniture. And I loved it. I loved the job. I learned a lot. So that was really my first pivot. And then second pivot happened more, I'll say, mid-career. And this was probably maybe just a little over 10 years ago now. I pivoted from being in business and industry into higher education. And when I went back to get my MBA, I had originally attended a community college before attending the University of Iowa, and I really did like my community college experience a lot. And I thought, at some point, maybe I will want to come back and teach. And I really did not, and still do not, have any desire to pursue a PhD, but oftentimes with enough, work experience and graduate level credits, there are opportunities to do some teaching. And so, I decided that I wanted to spend a little bit of time maybe taking on some adjunct teaching roles and see if this was something I would like. I just kind of reached a point in my career where I'd been traveling a lot. At this point, I now had 2 very small children at home, and I was looking for something that was maybe a little different, and I wouldn't be traveling as much, and could spend a little bit more time with my family. And so I did pick up some adjunct teaching just to kind of try it out to see, okay, is this something that I even like? And the first class I taught was Introduction to Computers, which is not something that was in my background, but it was a logical course, right? These are logical things that you're helping people understand about computers, and we're teaching them about Microsoft Office. So it was a great way for me to just kind of test things out. So I did some adjuncting, and then I decided that I wanted to do some independent consulting. So I actually left the corporate space, did independent consulting and teaching. And then pretty soon the teaching became bigger than the consulting. And I did end up eventually joining the University of Iowa in a role in the MBA program where I could combine the teaching and the consulting experience. And that was my first role, kind of official, I'll say, full-time role in higher ed. And that was a number of years ago. And since then, I've made several transitions within Tippie. But those were kind of I'll consider the two big pivots for me in my career. And one of the things that Kara asked me to look at ahead of time or just give some thought to is maybe if someone's trying to transition from academia into business and industry, what are some things to think about? And Kara, so many of the points that you already made were some of the things I was thinking about, primarily thinking about skills and relevant skills. It doesn't have to be an apples to apples kind of move, but still a case needs to be made, right? You need to be able to have the logical justification, kind of like in business. We're always trying to make sure we have logical justification for doing something or taking action. I think the burden of proof is more, you are definitely responsible for that as the individual wanting to make the change, that you can make that case. So it might make a difference. Are you an instructor in academia, or are you a researcher? Are you a staff? And you start thinking about the kinds of role that the role that you're in now in academia and the skills that you have, where might there be some alignment in other roles that are in the corporate space? So corporate training, sales, maybe you're in an analytical role in academia, and then thinking about how can you apply those analytical skills in a certain way in the corporate space. And then another thing to think about is industry. If you're not specific, if it's not specific as far as which role you want to take on in the corporate space, just think about how could you switch to an industry that's tangent to academia. So there are people who are content experts, right, in academia. And one example is they might become an exam writer at ACT. Ed tech is really hot right now. So, and in the startup space, you end up wearing a lot of different hats. So if you're good at a lot of different things, there are so many different ways to apply talents in a startup space. I would also say that being able to demonstrate some business knowledge. So an MBA is a great way to do that. And Kara alluded to picking up certifications along the way, if to be able to help prove that you've got that business acumen or business knowledge and be able to talk that language. And then leveraging the network, another point that Kara made. One thing is just make sure people are aware that you're looking to make a change, and talking with people who might be in an industry that you are thinking about joining, or in a role that you might be interested in, to learn more about it and get context so you could talk intelligently about what that environment is like or what that role is like. And then just making sure that you are leveraging your network and connecting the dots. Like you have that burden of proof to make that logical connection. So the cover letter even can be more important maybe in that kind of an application situation. So you can take the time to lay out the case as to what the qualifications are that you have that are relevant for the position that's open. All right, Ryan, I think you're up next.
All right, thank you. Get my video back on here. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Still morning for me, actually, but a couple tough acts to follow there. So my pivots have been a little different, so it might be interesting to some of you. I actually started my career in the military. I was in high school, or going into high school back, in the whole September 11th thing. So I got that red, white, and blue itch, and wanted to do that. Ended up in the Navy in signals intelligence. So actually spent about 10 years there. Had a lot of great opportunities, a lot of fun, learned a ton of stuff. It's a very kind of fluid environment, dealing with a lot of different technologies that are all built for purpose, just dealing with geopolitical situations and how rapidly things can change. But I made it about 10 years in, which is about halfway through your standard military career. And the Navy is really they're a jack of all trades, master of none type environment if you're looking to promote. And what I mean by that is there were specific types of work I had done in the past at that point that I really loved and was really good at. But for me to continue an upward trajectory, I was going to have to basically go do stuff I really didn't want to do. So my contract was coming to an end. And at that point, it's just like, well, if you're going to force a pivot, I guess I'll do a real one. So I returned to school, ended up in the Iowa MBA program, where I know many people on this call. And I'm glad that we talked about brand and reflection a little bit earlier, because I would describe my brand very simply as I get stuff done. That's how I sell it. I'm not the most patient person in the world, but so as a driver mentality and things like that, I have a lot of success just kind of moving things forward, which in consulting, which is where I'm at now, for instance, is a pretty good skill to have. And the reflection is important because I think Cindy's not lurking on the call somewhere, but as she can attest, my real goal coming out of business school was to make money. I wanted to optimize the income and go out and do that. So it's really at that point, banking or consulting. And here I am in consulting. I was very fortunate to find some good veteran networks there at Accenture. We have a strong military hiring program. So that's really what opened that door. So speaking to the networking piece, don't discount don't discount what you know in the communities, like for instance, at Accenture, we have a ton of employee resource groups. They can be very active in the community. So pay attention to stuff like that. If there are companies you're looking at, or is there a group that if you're former military, if you're, I don't know, former engineer, and you have kind of the diversity and inclusion type things, there's a lot of programs around, and that's a great way to meet people at a company you might be interested in working for. That's very much what opened doors for me with the veteran community at Accenture. Since joining Accenture, I kind of fell into supply chain, really, our supply chain practice, focusing mostly on regulated utilities. So they're interesting because they have, guaranteed revenue. They're not really competitive. They just make a case to the government every few years to get their money, and they watch it come in. They do have a lot of kind of unique business challenges, but they're kind of missing that full 360-degree business perspective that you're maybe accustomed to if you've sat in a business classroom. So I kind of wanted to do, get a little more what I call traditional clients, things like that. So I really kind of focused on that functional expertise of supply chain and skills there. And in particular, my expertise is sourcing and procurement, heavy on supplier relationship management and things like that. So I've been able to leverage that internally to shift over to projects more in the manufacturing and retail space here recently. And ultimately, that's what opened doors. I'm actually in the middle of another pivot now, going to industry for retail. So loved consulting. Might be back, I don't know, but it's just I want to see the industry side, because again, I came from the military and really haven't seen the client perspective before other than sitting across the table. So I'm excited for that. Do see one question in the chat that I can actually talk to right now because it is relevant. How do you navigate a career pivot with a change in income, especially a decrease? So kind of the world of consulting, typically if you go to industry, there's going to be some pay decrease. That is true in my case as well. So Cindy can faint now. But other than that, I would say you have to talk with your family. You have to look at the numbers and make sure it works and make sure it makes sense. It doesn't always have to be a huge pay decrease, but it really has to align with what you're wanting. And that's where that reflection piece comes in. So, again, coming out of B school, I wanted to make money. I wanted to do the corporate thing, that kind of hyper aggressive consulting world. And I've done that. Getting to a point, priorities are changing. Don't really know if I want to travel, so it's really, what is that worth to me? And that's what helps drive that conversation. So you have to do that reflection and understand, what are my priorities really? And as far as like opening up opportunities and like transitioning, focusing on functional skills or anything like that, my real rule is I never turn down a conversation. So make sure to have your social media, anything like that, up to date. Do not wait till you're job hunting to have it. Look good, reflect what you're doing, go through there every couple of months, especially if you're in a fast-paced role where your experience does change a lot. And just take care of it because, it's obviously the job market's hot right now, but recruiters reach out pretty frequently. They're actually great allies. I know they seem like gatekeepers, but feel free to chat them up, learn more about the role. Their job is to get you in front of the hiring manager if they think you're a fit. And if they believe you're a fit, they will go to bat for you. So take those conversations, learn things. Worst case, it's 15, 30 minutes of your day and it doesn't go anywhere. But I've had a lot of those. I've also had a lot of success, getting job offers, candidly. So they're not all a good fit. But they say it's much easier to find a job when you have one. So I would take those conversations. And yeah, that's about it. It's really just know what you want. Know what skills you have and know how to sell them. The only other thing I will add is it's also not worth beating your head against a brick wall. There are some people you're not going to convince you have the skills that they're looking for, even if you do. But eventually, if you have enough conversations, you're going to find the people who see that fit and they look at those soft skills that you have and can bring to the table, and your capability to learn what they do, your attitude, that's a huge one. And they're going to go to bat for you and give you that opportunity. But in other cases, you're not going to get there. But that's so it can be frustrating, but it tends to work out. Yeah, that's it for me.
All right. Thank you so much to our alum. I think that is some really great perspectives to keep in mind. I thank you all for your expertise and your experiences. All right. So moving on into our step 4, using your tools. Using those things that you already have about you to be able to make these pivots. So you've done the reflection, you've worked on your brand, you've worked on finding those skills. So what's next? Utilizing those different aspects of the resources that you would have the ability to grasp a hold of. So reviewing your resume. It might be, it's maybe been a few years since you have applied for a job, looked for a position, needed even your resume, right? So when we talk about their resumes change over time, what employers are looking for, so on and so forth. So have someone review your resume, look at your resume. We had a question about, what if someone feels that the items on their resume translate to the roles they're applying for, but they're not getting the interviews? What should they do? Should they edit? And the answer is yes. Have someone look at your resume. If you know somebody within the industry that you're trying to work in, that would be something that you could do. Try to use that resource. Growing your network, look within your existing network. Are there individuals who, say you're looking at a position within your current company, are those individuals there that you can reach out to? Is there a possibility of doing what we call informational interviews? And I think a couple of the alum alluded to that, Ryan especially, talking about just taking 10 or 15 minutes of someone's time and talking to them about why they enjoy working for a company, why they enjoy looking at different things. LinkedIn is a great way to do that, in that companies will show the individuals that have the same either connections as you do or the same background as you do. There might be a Tippie or several Tippie alum working at a company that you've really had your eye on. Reach out to those individuals. We always use the term hawks love helping hawks, and that is something that really, can drive that process. And people like to talk about themselves. So it's not a matter of I'm meeting with you to try to get a job. It's just want to learn more about you and what brought you to this company or why you're interested in this, this area. Utilizing that to be able to build your network too. Making a list of companies that maybe you're interested in through, this would be going to the prepare. So make a list of those that you have interest in, research individuals that work there, go through those informational, look at company websites. Does the company's mission, is that something that feeds that passion that you have found through your reflection? Is it something, do they have connections to things that really are interesting to you? And also being aware of your timeline, making sure that you are setting a realistic timeline, because this can be a daunting process. So a lot of times it's, like Ryan alluded to, being discouraged might be an aspect of it, but you want to be realistic about how long you're taking and, how long this is going to be, that you're going to be searching. And so making sure that you have that through your preparation too, as well. So we had several questions about gaining skills and what we can do. And we kind of alluded to it and I alluded to it in one of the other slides, but doing career assessments can be very helpful. We had a question on that. It can help you it can kind of provide direction on what drives you. What is your passion? What is it that you want to do? What challenges are you looking for? That can really be helpful. LinkedIn Learning is one that I always suggest to individuals because there's abilities to gain skills. There's workshops where you can have certificates that you gain that, different things. We had a question about a long-term program closing and how do they gain marketable current skills. This would be a suggestion that I would have. And just so many online resources you can take advantage of. We had a question about somebody who is exploring opportunities abroad and how do they go about looking for individuals or positions that you could do without a work visa. Going to different resources like goabroad.com or indeed.com, they would have information, or just researching in general. So making sure you do your research to find these different things that you're looking for that would fit your process. The last and final step that I would say to consider is to leverage and grow your network. Networking over time has started to look a little bit differently, but I think being strategic, being intentional, being brave, getting out of your comfort zone, being helpful, and then of course that being consistency is very important in a network. A network is something that can very much help you. We heard all 3 alumni talk about network and how important that is. So when you're thinking through this process, what is the strategy? What is it that I want to accomplish in adding this person to my network or networking with this individual? How can this key stakeholder, what are the key stakeholders that I need to reach out? How can that connection help me? Who are the decision makers? Who are the connectors who want to be able to connect with that individual? Being intentional. Does the connection make sense? To say, I'm a member of 12 professional organizations and I attend every meeting and every committee, and joining and doing everything isn't always the answer. You want to make sure you're narrowing that down to the important ones, being involved in those things that make sense to your goals, to your passions. Just having a long list on a piece of paper doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best use of your time. Getting out of your comfort zone. These informational interviews that I just talked about, they're almost like a cold call for those of you that have done sales. It's a reach out. But again, people like to talk about themselves. So ask if you can have coffee with them one morning for 10 minutes. It can be virtual. In this day and age, we can meet virtually. You don't even have to meet in person if you don't want to. And, you might reach out to 10 people and only 5 respond, but it's the ability to be able to connect with individuals and, again, build that thoughtful network. And also the helpful side is, if you are connecting with these individuals, is it something that you can help them in the long run? Are you kind of reciprocating why you're wanting to network? And lastly, just being consistent, staying connected. Again, not about filling your LinkedIn with 500 connections and then never speaking to them, never maybe asking them for advice or reaching out to them. It's making sure you keep those contacts alive, so to speak. All right. So what are the takeaways? Again, reflection, very important. Making sure that you're reflecting on why it is that I want to pivot. Identifying what skills, and if need be, gathering more skills based on what you're wanting to do. Reinventing that brand, making sure it is reflective of what you are wanting to achieve, what your goal is, what your career path is. Utilizing tools and resources to the best of your ability, going out and finding those things, using those things you may already have. And then again, leveraging and growing your network, using your network to your best ability. I really liked what Ryan said about, it being a little tough. And the thing I kept thinking about was just don't give up. You just might have to readjust. Might have to readjust the way you're thinking. You might get to the end of something and it not be what you want. Or you might reach out in an informational interview and it not be the company that you thought it was that you want to work for. Find those things that drive you. You're not alone in this process. There are many people across the board that are doing this, but just being thoughtful in the way that you're networking, planning, and organizing this can really be a help. So, you utilize those things that you have in your background and you will be able to get through the process. Okay, I thank you for your attention and we'll open it up for questions now.
Great, thanks so much, Kara. I appreciate that. So I want to remind people that if you do have a question, please feel free to go to the Q&A and you can type that in. We'll see how many of them we can get to. One of the questions that came out is about pivoting within a company and having people kind of take that chance on you. And Jan, you talked about that a little bit. If you could, how do you do that? How do you make people outside of the unit that you're working in, but within the larger company, take a look at your skill sets for a completely different unit?
That is a great question. For me personally, it was having advocates inside the company that were really helpful. So then it's thinking, what steps do I need to take to make sure that I have advocates within the company? So one of my first strongest advocates was the person that I reported to directly. And so that individual was able to kind of help also create some momentum and knowledge in the organization that I was interested in doing something different and leverage his network in that regard. And just because I was in HR, I knew a lot of people in the organization. But if you don't know a lot of people in the organization, think about what you could do to get to meet more people so that people get to know you even maybe as a person first, and then, help them understand what your goals are from a career perspective and what your skills are.
Right. Kate, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, if I could add to this. So this was a mistake I made early in a pivot I was trying to make, was almost being too forward looking and thinking too much about that next role. But, let the ball drop somewhat in my current role. And what you really want is for, the manager or leader in that other part of the organization to look at you and be able to say, wow, what a great team member, what a great leader. They're really knocking their current role out of the park, and they, are starting to express interest in coming over here. I definitely want them because they're such a great employee. And if you're not demonstrating success and all sorts of good team, team player type things in your current role, they're not going to even be interested in having you, in their team regardless. So focus on doing well where you're at and use that as kind of I can be successful, let me try this new thing.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So, Kara, I'm going to direct the next one to you simply because we've seen in some of the questions submitted prior as well as today, there are a lot of questions about I'm doing well, but I'm not getting the interview. I'm doing well, but I'm not getting, I'm interviewing, but I'm not getting selected. As a career coach, what are the types of things that people can do to, help their resume align more with a role? Maybe they're just not thinking about if the job app says this word, use it in your resume. So anything resume wise, as well as interview wise, how can people kind of brush up those skills, let's say?
Sure, absolutely. I think the first and foremost thing you've already talked about was the resume. The resume is the most important thing to make sure that it's refreshed and it's renewed. And even like that question that I had, thinking that your resume might be aligned and maybe it's not, you're just not getting those interviews, you're not getting pulled in. Having someone review it, having someone look at it, or maybe even you can go out and find resume examples that you can kind of see the format. There are formats that some individuals are looking for. So you want to make sure that that is up to date. That's the most important thing. As far as interviewing skills, that is something that you probably do need to brush up on. If your current job has not required you to have those skills, I mean, it's one of those things where, when we're fresh out of college, we kind of go through those motions where we're interviewing with individuals and we're talking about ourselves, and we can do it really easy. And we have that, that elevator speech that we can kind of blurt right back out. But if you don't do it for many years or even a short term, you kind of lose that. So maybe when we talk about reinventing your brand, kind of think about those things. What are those things that I can pull out that I can talk about that would be relevant to what I'm applying for or the job I'm seeking? And practice always makes perfect. So if it's your family, if it's a friend that you can kind of have quiz you and ask you questions and getting feedback on that, that's really important too. But yes, there are online, and I think that, and Cindy, can you confirm this? There is, with the Palmeiras Career Center, alumni have connection to that, and there is an app that's on there called Big Interview. And Big Interview is actually something that you can take advantage of, where you go in and you apply for positions, and there's individuals who are doing a practice interview with you, and you get the feedback on your interview, and you can they will tell you things to work on. They will tell you things you might miss or that you could add according to what would be on your resume. So just utilizing those resources to maybe help you make those steps.
That's a great point to make, Kara, because you're right. Big Interview is a system on the Palmeiras Career Center's website that any alum can take advantage of. You can use both Handshake, which is a job search tool, but you can use Big Interview and practice those interview skills. So we're kind of up against time as it happens. So I just want to take a moment to thank Kara for her presentation, and to Kate, Jan, and Ryan for participating and providing your alum perspective. Greatly appreciated. Now, when this event ends in just a moment, you'll see a quick survey, and we'd be grateful if you could share your thoughts and help us make our virtual events better. Now, we hope to see you all again on any of our other webinars. And on behalf of the Tippie College of Business, we want to thank you for joining us. And as always, go Hawks. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.